Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajaka Stotra Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Charja Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Shamanamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Bol. Thank you, Maharaj. And thank you, everyone, for being here for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. It is Monday, December 19th, 2022, in New York, a day later in Vrindavan. We are starting a new chapter in the third canto tonight, Creation of the Kumaras and Others, chapter 12, starting with verse number 1. Eager to hear everyone's comments and questions as always. And if you'd like to lead tonight's closing kirtan, please make up your mind to do that now and jump right in at the appropriate time. That would be great. And we're so grateful you could be with us, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Kendra Prabhu. I hope our video is better than in testing before.
It's great now.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Maitreya Vacha Tite Varnitakshatta Kalakya Padamatmanaha Mahima Veda Garbhota Vikasrakshin Niboddhame. Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. So the Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tathati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Pradijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Shahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Holy Priye Vanshako Patarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we've heard about personality of Godhead and his feature of Kala. Kala means time. Now we'll hear about the creation of Brahma. Creation of Brahma means by Brahma here, not how Brahma was created, but what he creates. Sasarjagrein tatam ishram atatam ishram adikrit ahamoham shamoham sha tamascha jnana vrittaya. Brahma first created the nescient engagements, like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception, or forgetfulness of one's real identity. Purport. Before the factual creation of the living entities in different varieties of species. The conditions under which a living being in the material world has to live were created by Brahma. Unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it's impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. Therefore, the first condition of material existence is forgetfulness of one's real identity. And by forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death, although a pure living soul is deathless and birthless. This false identification with material nature is the cause of false ownership of things which are offered by the arrangement of superior control. All material resources are offered to the living entity for his peaceful living and for the discharge of the duties of self-realization in conditioned life. But due to false identification, the conditioned soul becomes entrapped by the sense of false ownership of the property of the Supreme Lord. It is evident from this verse that Brahma himself is a creation of the Supreme Lord, and the 5 kinds of nescience which condition the living entities in material existence are creations of Brahma. It is simply ludicrous to think the living entity to be equal with the Supreme Being, when one can understand that the conditioned souls are under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. Patanjali also accepts that there are 5 kinds of nescience, as mentioned herein. So here, Brahma creates the background conditions of material existence. These conditioned souls are meant to be born into ignorance, ajnana timirandhasya. So the ignorance has to be there. The binding features of material existence need to be there first. The prison has to be completed. Then we can, or at least it has to be, reach a certain stage of construction. The way we build temples, first we build the basics, then we move in, and then we finish up the job. But a certain standard has to be there before we can even camp out. So Brahma, so the living beings are meant to be born into material existence. So material existence has to be established first, the conditions of material existence. Then the living entities can come out in their various bodies with their various engagements. So Brahma creates Andatamishra, Tamishra, Mahamoham, Moham, Tamas, and Jnanavritti. These are all described in the purport. The self-deception, the basic basis is forgetting Krishna, thinking I'm independent, and thinking I'm this body, thinking that things in relationship to this body are mine. That's the gist of it. And then becoming frustrated and fearful of death. So all of this, these fundamentals of material existence are first created by Brahma, and then subsequent creation can take place. Any questions here so far? How does Maya Devi fit in here? Meena asks. Well, that's a good question. In one sense, Brahma's in the business of elaborating what Maya is meant to present to the living entities. Just as if we have some illusory, well, I'll take the typical one, man is attracted by a woman. We even say, oh, that woman is Maya Devi. Yeah, someone other than his wife. That's Maya Devi. So how does Maya fit in there? Maya is working through the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, the senses, the sense objects, and so on. So Maya is always there in the background. She provides all the ingredients in the ingredient providing function. Then, as the material nature becomes active, Maya has two functions: the throwing capability and the covering capability, prakshep atmika and avaranatmika. So Maya's going to throw the living entities into the material nature and then cover them. And Brahma has a role here to play in providing the background for particularly the covering arrangements. He provides the arrangements in cooperation, you can say, with the material energy, because he's in charge of elaborating the affairs of this universe, this tiny corner of the prison. I hope that's okay. Vikendra Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. After hearing you speak on this, I doubt that I can certainly add anything, but this one sentence I love so much, that unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it is impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. I really appreciate how you pointed out how Brahma is in charge of creating this facility for people to forget Krishna, especially because most conditioned living entities, they have a very limited concept of reality. They think this reality is the only reality, and then they blame God for the conditions under which they have to live. But the underlying basis of everything, the reason that Brahma creates this whole thing, is because they don't want Krishna. They want anything but Krishna, so they've got to have some really elaborate illusion, and that's what he's creating. Just right off the bat, in the way the chapter starts, is that he's creating all these things that look very, very negative, and you might think, well, why? How come? But that's prison life, and that's, I think, what most, at least me, I have to constantly remind myself of. So I'm very grateful for your presentation on this.
Your kindness. It's Brahma's duty to create all these unhappy features. What can you do? When I looked at that, unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it's impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. It's interesting. There are two ways to read that, it seems. One is it would be impossible for him to live in the material conditions if they weren't there. I can't live in the prison unless the prison is there. So that's certainly one way to read it. And another way to read it is that unless he forgets his real identity, he couldn't possibly live in a place like this. It would be unbearable. If I remembered my real identity and what my real engagement is, how could I bear to live in a place like this? So taking either reading, I think they both fit our philosophy.
And the latter reading that you just expounded on was the exact mood, it seems to me, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yeah, if I really had love for Krishna, I couldn't bear to live here. Yeah. Thank you. Mahaprasad.
All right, just another angle as well. Unless the living entity is put in that forgetful condition, to be able to run his own materialistic life.
A little louder.
Unless the living entity is put in that forgetful condition, he wouldn't be able to run his material life with full ego or whatever. So is that true that sometimes...
If the living entity weren't put into this condition, he wouldn't be able to run his material life. He needs false ego and all of that. Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. That things would not go on without this, without these fundamental illusory creations by Brahma. Yeah. Thank you. Tulsi Priya.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. I was just thinking that line struck me also. I was thinking the converse or inverse, not sure which one it is also must also be true then, that if you remember your real identity, then it becomes impossible for you to live in the material conditions.
Well, it's possible, or looking at it another way, one doesn't live in a material condition.
Right.
One lives in Krishna consciousness, even in this material world. Jivan Mukta Suchate. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Shall we move on? Okay. Drishtva papi asim shrishtim natmanam bhavamanyata bhagavatyana putena manasanyam tatosrajat. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation. Purport. Although he created the different influences of nescience, Lord Brahma was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task. But he had to do it because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be so. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15 that he's present in everyone's heart and is helping everyone to either remember or forget. The question may be raised, why the Lord, who is all merciful, helps one to remember and another to forget? Actually, his mercy is not exhibited in partiality towards one and enmity toward another. The living entity, as part and parcel of the Lord, is partially independent because he partially possesses all the qualities of the Lord. Anyone who has some independence may sometimes misuse it due to ignorance. When a living entity prefers to misuse his independence and glide down toward nescience, the all-merciful Lord first of all tries to protect him from the trap. But when the living entity persists in gliding down to hell, the Lord helps him to forget his real position. The Lord helps the falling living entity glide down to the lowest point, just to give him the chance to see if he's happy by misusing his independence. I heard that Srila Prabhupada once gave the example of a child wanting to put his finger in a fan. The father says, "Don't put your finger in the fan, you'll hurt yourself." And the child, no, don't do that, you'll hurt yourself. No. And after a few iterations of that, the father says, "All right." So that's called learning the hard way. The Lord tries to protect the living entity from the trap, Prabhupada says, but doesn't force it. All right, you have a little independence. Try it out and see if it works for you. And of course, it doesn't. Almost all the conditioned souls who are rotting in the material world are misusing their independence, and therefore 5 kinds of nescience are imposed upon them, as previously enumerated. As an obedient servitor of the Lord, Brahma creates all these as a matter of necessity, but he's not happy in doing so, because a devotee of the Lord naturally does not like to see anyone falling down from his real position. Persons who do not care for the path of realization get full facilities from the Lord for executing their proclivities to the fullest extent, and Brahma helps in that procedure without fail. So, as Prabhupada said that Maya has a thankless task, the Lord Brahma also has a thankless task, and he doesn't relish it, having to create this sinful world. This is not a pleasing engagement for him. But he does it because it's his duty. Yes, Kendra.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. The last sentence in the first paragraph of the purport gave me a clue. The Lord helps the falling living entity glide down to the lowest point just to see if he's happy. And you gave the example of the father allowing the child to stick his finger in the fan. I've heard that Prabhupada actually did that very thing, but he turned the fan off first. He unplugged it first and let it slow down. Now you put your finger so it wouldn't actually chop off his finger. But what I was thinking is how glide down to the lowest point. It's like if you don't hit rock bottom and you don't see the need to go up, then you'll just go on again and again, trying and trying and trying. But you've got to hit the lowest point. Each living entity has their own particular version of rock bottom, and they have to hit there, apparently, if they're learning the hard way, like you say.
Brahmatam Uparjita, in the Bhagavatam, it said that the living entities wander from the highest to the lowest regions of the material world. So sometimes when we're on a higher position, we think that we're not enjoying because we're not giving ourselves freedom for unrestricted enjoyment. So, all right, try unrestricted enjoyment. That is to say, degrade yourself. See if that works. And there's so many who do exactly that. And that, of course, doesn't work. Well, it's because I'm in this low degraded position that it's not working. If I were in a heavenly environment, then it would work. And that doesn't work either. Murari Gupta, it's intriguing to hear the details of how these things are achieved. So much more satisfying and convincing than just imagining it's done with a wave of a magic wand. Yes, we hear that it's done with Brahma's magic wand, but the details are also given. Thank you. Tulsi Priya.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. I was just thinking how interesting it is that Srila Prabhupada uses the word gliding. He uses that often in reference to somebody becoming degraded or falling from their position. And it almost sounds like it's easy, like a leaf just gets detached from a tree and, drifts in the wind and finally hits the ground. And I imagine that, in one sense, that is true for us in the material world. It's like you don't have to exert yourself in the sense of, I must fall down, I must degrade myself. You just have a desire and you follow it, and the degradation occurs automatically, and you're enjoying it, and then afterwards the consequences kick in. But by then you're stuck, and you if you don't have the knowledge to realize, why do I have to suffer, it's just so easy to go further down from that point, it seems.
Like a business that's going down, it glides into bankruptcy. It's losing money, losing more money, losing more money, losing more money. And then at some point they say this business is irretrievable. So it glides down, or anything that degrades. Yeah. Shall we go on?
Thank you.
Sanakam cha sanandam cha sanatanam atatmabhyu sanat kumaram shamunin niskriyan urdvareta saha. In the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumar. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semens flowing upwards. Purport. Although Brahma created the principles of nescience as a matter of necessity for those living entities who were destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord, he was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task. He therefore created 4 principles of knowledge: Sankhya, or empirical philosophy for the analytical study of material conditions; Yoga, or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage; Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding; and tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. Brahma created the 4 great sages, Sanak, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat, to entrust them with these 4 principles of spiritual advancement. And they inaugurated their own spiritual party, or sampradaya, known as the Kumara Sampradaya, or later on as the Nimbarka Sampradaya, for the advancement of bhakti. All of these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. So Brahma had that unhappy business in the first round of creation, he had to create these principles of avidya, ignorance. Does it say avidya nivrita, something like that? The previous verse. That's going back too far. My Kindle doesn't favor going back and forth. But in any case, he created these ignorant fundamental principles. But now he creates the Kumars who embody Vidya, transcendental knowledge. They're called the four sanas, Sana, Sanatanam, Sanat Kumar, Sanandana, Sananda, Sanakam. So they're all sanas, four Chatusana, therefore four sanas. And they embody these four principles, Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, and one more. Let's see. Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, and Tapasya, austerity. Which one of these was represented by which Kumara is not specified. It seems, well, I won't say whether they're all representing all four or whether each represents one. My impression was that each represents one. But that's not stated in the text, so I won't insist on it, or really we don't know. But these four were embodied in these four sages. They were unwilling to adopt materialistic life. Munin niskritya. They were they were great sages, so they were freed from the propensity to enjoy fruitive activities. And urdhvaretasa, they were Naishtik brahmacharis. Urdhvaretasa, urdhva means upwards. So they preserved their ojas in the Ayurveda. The semen is identified with ojas, or vitality. Vitality. When semen is wasted on sex life in whatever way, then one is reducing one's vitality. And when semen is preserved, then it, Prabhupada said, flows upward to the brain, and one is endowed with great powers of memory and, in general, vitality or strength. So these Kumars were perfect brahmacharis, Naistik brahmacharis. In fact, they keep themselves, this is their brahmacharya strategy, they keep themselves as young children, because young children will never be disturbed by sexual desire. Prabhupada cited that one time Shyam Sundar's daughter, Saraswati, asked her father, when you were little, were you a boy or a girl? So the children are innocent in these matters. And so the Kumars, being reluctant to get involved in materialistic life, remained brahmacharis and remained children. Just as we hear that the soul in the womb wants, at some point, the fortunate soul prays to the Lord, let me stay here. First he prays, let me get out of here, it's so miserable. And then he thinks better and says, no, let me stay here, because when I go out, then Maya's going to get me, I'll lose my memory. So, but then he's pushed out, he can't do anything. But these four sages, they're able to keep themselves as little children, and they remain perfect brahmacharis. So this was the next creation by Brahma, the creation of the Kumaras, who were situated in transcendental knowledge. Turbine says, argument, how can a material element like semen have an effect on the elevation of a soul? These are how can intelligence happen? Ultimately, the soul will be elevated by the mercy of Krishna. Ahaitiki apratiyata. It doesn't depend on any material condition. One may be in any situation and be uplifted by the mercy of the Lord. But still, jnana vairagya yuktaya. These things are favorable for devotional service. Jnana, vairagya, tapasya, and philosophical understanding. And these things are supported, nourished by brahmacharya. These things, a peaceful mind. What is that? Sada samudvigna mana. Sada samudvigna dhyam sadgrahat. Those who are always grasping at something impermanent are always disturbed in mind. Samudvigna dhyam. Their intelligence is always completely disturbed. And on the contrary, those who are not grasping for material pleasure, who are, what is the word, nivritta here? Niskriyam, free from fruitive activities. They can have a peaceful mind. And a peaceful mind is conducive to spiritual realization. The mode of goodness is conducive to spiritual realization. Sattvat sanjayate jnana. Or even we're told that it's better to live in the countryside, than in the city. Why? Because the city's in the mode of passion and ignorance. And the countryside is in the mode of goodness. So the sages prefer to live in the countryside, they prefer to live in a holy place, because these are conducive for spiritual realization. They won't produce bhakti. It's not that by living in the countryside or living in a holy place or by being a brahmachari or being learned, one automatically becomes fit for bhakti or achieves bhakti. That's not possible. Bhakti only comes from bhakti. Bhakti only comes from mercy of Krishna. But these conditions are conducive, anukul, they're favorable for devotional service. Very favorable. Vairagya, tapasya, jnana. These are favorable. So brahmacharya is extremely favorable for devotional service. There are brahmacharis who aren't devotees. The Mayavadis can be very strict brahmacharis, but they're Mayavadis. So we're not interested in brahmacharya for the sake of brahmacharya. All of these things are of value insofar as they support bhakti, or they contribute to the development of bhakti. There's also a question by Meena before Praveen. So let me back up and find it. Really? Back to Brahma and Maya. So Brahma is actually serving Maya in her service. Yeah, he's elaborating the material creation, which is the domain of Maya. So he's serving Krishna and serving Maya. Not that he's in Maya, not that he's in Maya, that he's, Maya Das, just as a servant of Maya. But he's cooperating with Krishna's plan, and Maya is also cooperating with Krishna's plan. It's Jnana Rupamapi Yasya Cheshtate. On the other hand, the Kumars are not part of Maya's plan. They're not meant for increasing the confusion and bewilderment of the living entities. So Brahma's not just, so Brahma creates them also. He creates the Kumaras who provide these higher principles. And as we'll see in coming verses, he also creates Narad Muni, who embodies pure devotion and service. So Brahma's not just a servant of illusion. He's serving Krishna's purposes, and Krishna has multiple plans. He plans the material creation with bewilderment and frustration and anger and fear, but also included in the plan of the material world is the opportunity to become self-realized and to go back home, back to Godhead. So Brahma serves the entire plan of the Lord, whether they fit in with Maya's particular duties or not, Maya's particular functions or not. Okay. Anything else?
There's another question in the chat, Marge, from Prabeen.
Brahma created 5 types of nescience. So, being the creator, he cannot be influenced by his creation. That was the subject matter of Brahma's prayers for the creative energy in the previous chapter. How am I going to do this and not get entangled? Because the tendency is I create something and then I'm influenced by what I create. And Krishna tells him, be situated in devotional service and you won't be overwhelmed. The Kumar Sampradaya, by the way, if I'm not wrong, comes to the Nimbarka Sampradaya, and then Pushti Marg comes from that same root. The Pushti Marg Sampradaya of Vallabhacharya is especially prominent in Bombay and Gujarat. So that Pushti Marg comes originally from the Kumar Sampradaya. Murari Gupta says, it's interesting that a sexually immature person can have vast spiritual knowledge, like Prahlad and Dhruva. It goes against the usual refrain of, wait till you're bigger, then you'll understand, or even just grow up. There's an argument there that first you have to experience what it's all about, then you can renounce it after you've fully understood it. This is a specious argument. The hippies at 26 Second Avenue gave this argument to Srila Prabhupada. Have you ever tried LSD? And when Prabhupada said no, then it's like, aha. But then Prabhupada said, but my students have, and they've all given it up. It's not that in order to refrain from intoxicants, one first has to experience every intoxicant under the sun. It's not that to refrain from sex, one first has to experience every variety of sex or any variety of sex. I think that argument was given to Shankaracharya by someone who was debating him. And he it said that Shankara entered someone's body, body, and so sort of very vicariously experienced it, and then said, all right, nothing's changed here. The conclusion is the same. That's the story, right? Yeah. So in any case, one doesn't have to experience every kind of degradation. We don't have to make a program. First, let me do X. Although, as Prabhupada said, that's the program of the conditioned souls. First, let me try everything, essentially. And Krishna gives them the opportunity. All right, try it out and see if it works for you. But the intelligent person, Prabhupada said, learns by hearing. Not that he has to, at least in this lifetime. He probably gave that example also, that you've already done all those things in previous lifetimes. You've had millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. You've basically done everything. So now in this lifetime, just this one lifetime, dedicate yourself fully to Krishna consciousness. All right. Anything else?
Maharaj,
Yeah.
That last comment you made, it was along the lines of what I was thinking. I think some sannyasi was saying that people will often complain about sannyasis making statements about marriage life and women and everything, and as if, well, you're not in our position, so you don't know. And he said, but sannyas is to be understood that you have already come through all conditions and that you're giving it up. And I guess whether it's in this life or in the previous lives. So somebody who's in the position of sannyas, we're supposed to understand that they've already been through all conditions of life and they've given it up. And so they're qualified to speak on various topics, even if they're not directly involved in them. And I won't say every single topic, but in general, as far as
Think about that.
I'm sorry.
There's a few things about that argument that, well, you're a sannyasi, so you don't really know, or you're speaking from a sannyas bias. One thing, of course, is that many sannyasis do know. They've been through it all. Mangala Thakur, he's involved with a prostitute, or just ordinary family life. So many sannyasis have come from the Grihastha ashram, so they know what married life is. It's not that they're coming from some position of inexperience or naivete. They've been there, and this is their mature conclusion that at some point one should give up family life. That's one consideration. While I'm thinking of it, this argument was also given by Daksha to Nard Muni, that his sons should first have the opportunity to understand material life, then they can give it up. And no, one should, at the earliest opportunity, as soon as one understands the matter factually, one should free oneself from material engagement. The other thing about your argument there is that it's a specious argument. It's essentially a form of ad hominem argument, where instead of taking the subject being argued and considering whether it's true or false, or to what extent it might be true, instead we focus on the person who made the argument. We focus on the person who made the argument, what his character is, or what his experience is, or what his ashram is, or what his nationality is, or something else about him. This is it fits into a few categories of fallacious arguments. One is it's a form of switching the topic. The topic is not the character or experience of the person being cited. The topic is what about what he's saying? You know, he may be a Mayavadi, or he may be a fallen devotee, or he may be an academic, or he may be just a rank and filer, or whatever else you want to say about him. But what he says is what matters, not what his qualifications are for saying it. Unless he's being cited as an authority, and you can say, well, he's not an authority because of X, Y, Z. But otherwise, it's a form of switching the topic. We're concerned with whether material enjoyment is helpful or not helpful, not whether the person who suggested it wasn't helpful is in an ashram, this ashram or that ashram. So we're switching the topic. And we're giving an ad hominem argument, so that's a type of topic switching. And it's also a third kind of fallacy called poisoning the well. When someone has something to say that could diminish our argument, then we seek to discredit him so that nothing he says can be believed or accepted. And nothing he says could possibly be true because he's a Mayavadi, he's a Ritvik, he's a GBC man, he's a sannyasi, he's a householder, she's a woman, this, that, whatever the reason is. So now you can, a conspiracy theorist, now we can discount everything the person's going to say because we've poisoned the well. The water in the well is poisonous, so you don't want to take any of this. So we don't have to address the arguments. We can just leave them aside because we know that everything in this well is poison. So that's an invalid form of argument, not to be adopted. Murari Gupta says it's interesting. Okay, we got that. All right, and we're at 6:29 in my time, which is the end. And it's time for that jumping into kirtan mentioned earlier by Kendra. And thank you very much.
All right, I will jump in. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajaka Ashtottara Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Sridhar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande. Thank you all very much. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayadvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Doug Shara. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Meena. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Hare Krishna.